what would be his advice to somebody who keeps getting kicked in the nuts over and over and is and is regularly or keeps having a splitting headache that lasts for months on end? What would his sort of layperson advice be to them about how to deal with that?
So Nietzsche's ultimate goal for all of his philosophy is this concept of amor fati, which I think is a phrase that he borrowed from Stoic philosophy, but is using it in a very different way. So the kind of culmination of his philosophical project is the idea of loving literally everything that happens to you, and not merely kind of being content or kind of accepting it, but truly loving it. And it's kind of, I mean, he definitely never got there because, if you read his letters, he's not necessarily a happy bunny a lot of the time. But so the advice that when he's writing about how he deals with his own pain, he largely talks about it as a kind of resistance to overcome. So something that he's in some twisted way enjoying overcoming. He uses, and he kind of channels it into his writing. So he has these splitting headaches and he has this, I can't remember the exact metaphor, but he talks about how it was so painful that it kind of focused his mind in a strange sense. And so he channeled that pain into his writing or into his work. And although that's not a kind of bit of his formal philosophy, it is nonetheless kind of reminiscent of some of the stuff he does say in his formal philosophy, where he talks about kind of sublimating pain or suffering or sublimating your drives towards this kind of organized will whose aim is fundamentally to overcome resistance, and as a result must will resistance for themselves.
Would that mean that a life without resistance would be kind of like a hell?
Yeah, essentially. He's very worried about human potential. So one of the images from Nietzsche's philosophy that really sticks out to a lot of people is the figure of the last man, which is a character in Thus Spake Zarathustra, where the last man is sort of a kind of passive nihilist, but the thing that they're hankering after is contentment. So not contentment in the kind of, I don't know, like Buddhist sense, I suppose, of kind of reaching nirvana, although Nietzsche also has a problem with that. This sort of, all right, I'm going to avoid challenge and resistance as much as I possibly can. And there are two reasons why Nietzsche is opposed to this. The first is that he's got this sort of, I don't want to call it sentimental, but he's got this real investment in the idea of humans achieving their potential. You see this kind of, again, all through his works. Even he has an essay called Schopenhauer as Educator, where he's kind of reflecting on the work of Arthur Schopenhauer. And in that, he has this kind of like almost mini rant in the middle of the essay, which is like really fascinating, about how he just like absolutely cannot stand it when people don't, in his words, kind of embrace what they could uniquely be as them, and instead allow these other pressures to interfere with, again, to kind of invoke his terms, to interfere with them becoming who they are. If resistance isn't there, he's worried that humanity will just kind of decay into this like sludge that doesn't do anything. He's worried that all we'll do is kind of, we'll sit around on our sofas, pursuing comfort, avoiding pain. And as a result, we will also never feel for him the kind of joys of actually ending up overcoming resistance. So, I mean, again, it still sounds very abstract when you put it like this. It's actually quite an intuitive thought where, imagine that you'd literally never struggled in life. Like, I understand, I'm sure that Nietzsche wouldn't like actually wish his headache upon himself, but we could imagine a person who literally never encounters any struggle. Well, if we all recognize that there's a real feeling of achievement in overcoming some kind of struggle or resistance, even if it's just a small one, then for Nietzsche, this person will never experience they will never experience the kind of fulfillment that comes with having overcome something.
Does that mean that he hates weak people? Was he not a fan of sort of cowardly, weak people?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, in a lot of ways, arguably Nietzsche wasn't like a massively strong person. He was a nervous wreck for much of his life. Again, he suffered from a terrible chronic pain condition. And so there's this sort of back and forth that goes on in a lot of kind of popular discussions on Nietzsche, where people sort of quite understandably pose the question of, does Nietzsche really live up to his own ideal here? And again, if we perceive of power as overcoming resistance, then arguably he gets some of the way there. But I think that it is perfectly plausible to turn Nietzsche's challenge back on him and say, well, hang on a second, man, you got rejected by by a couple of girls, and then you decided you hated like women as a whole, and you kind of ran from basically any criticism that you got, and you kind of retreated to your cabin and went on walks in the Alps, and that doesn't sound like it's overcoming resistance all that much. So to bring it back to Nietzsche's view on weak people, yeah, he has a real contempt for them, like in a way that I think it's very easy to run from when you're reading Nietzsche, because we've had 70 years of since the end of World War II, so 80 years now, of people going, okay, the Nazis were a real fan of Nietzsche. This seems a bit. Have they misinterpreted him? What's been going on here? And basically everyone agrees that, yeah, okay, they have misinterpreted him in some key ways. This does sometimes lead to the creation of what I call fluffy bunny Nietzsche, which is where you sort of imbue Nietzsche with whatever you personally think is a really good thing and pretend that he said it, which is kind of relatively easy to do on the basis that Nietzsche himself says an awful lot of things, a lot of which contradict one another. You can kind of pick and choose little bits and create your own sort of model Nietzsche that says everything that you want him to say. But nonetheless, Nietzsche does have a real contempt for what he sees as weakness. And I often sometimes wonder to what extent he turned that contempt on himself. I think that he has this view for a number of reasons. The first is that he sort of thinks that weakness breeds dishonesty. So again, this coming back to that kind of sour grapes point. But secondly, he thinks that in his view, a kind of unwillingness to overcome resistance, which is broadly how he defines weakness, kind of an unwillingness or an inability to overcome resistance, is going to eventually lead this person to kind of become a nihilist. So Nietzsche has this very confusing way of talking about like weak people, or quote unquote weak people, because again, he has a kind of weird esoteric definition for it, whereby he quite often says, oh yeah, man, like I hate them, I have scorn for them, or something like that. And then at other points he says, no, I love all people. And you sit there and you think, well, these things are very difficult to go together. And a lot of the time this is resolved by interpreters by saying something like, well, if you imagine that Nietzsche's project is for everyone to become willing and able to overcome resistance, because he truly thinks, whether he's right or wrong, he truly thinks that is the way that you can not become nihilistic in a world without God and without any kind of given meaning for yourself. Then when he's kind of hard on weak people, I think a lot of interpreters will kind of try and reinterpret this. And, I think that probably this thing is a broadly sensible interpretation as a kind of tough dad attitude. A sort of, it would be in some way condescending to extend pity to people when Nietzsche fully knows that they could become this kind of this figure of uniquely themselves, and they could overcome resistance. So that's one of his broad critiques of compassion, which is sort of very difficult to get your head around, is that he thinks compassion is bad for the person that is the person that one is being compassionate towards. He thinks that you're in some way holding them back. Which again it's like it's a very abstract point when Nietzsche puts it. But again, we kind of all recognize that whether you want to take it as extreme as Nietzsche does, that there are contexts where this attitude is appropriate. And I'm thinking of my own dad, right? And my dad was sort of very, you must overcome challenges type thing. And in hindsight, I'm very, very grateful for that, because it kind of taught me how to be more independent. I think of some people I know who had maybe much, quote unquote, softer parents, and actually, I don't know, did that benefit them? I don't think it did. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think that Nietzsche's way of putting this is probably far beyond anything that most people want to accept now, because he is really, really anti-compassion and anti-pity. There are like a couple of passages where he's talking about, oh yeah, well, you can be magnanimous if you want. But on the whole, he's very, very, very hard on people that he perceives as weak.
This episode is brought to you by Element. Summer hits different when you're actually hydrated. That tired, foggy, muscle crampy feeling most people chalk up to heat or exhaustion, it might be electrolytes, and plain water alone won't fix it, which is why Element is such a game changer. It's a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mixed with sodium, potassium, and magnesium in the exact ratio your body needs. No sugar, no food dyes, no artificial junk. And this summer, they've dropped something new, lemonade salt. It's like a lemon popsicle grew up, got its life together, and started supporting your adrenal system and your hydration. And best of all, There's a no questions asked refund policy. So you can buy it, try it for as long as you want, and if you don't like it, they'll give you your money back and you don't even need to return the box. That's how confident they are that you'll love it. Plus, they offer free shipping in the US. Right now, you can get a free sample pack of all 8 flavors with your first box by going to the link in the description below or heading to drinklmnt.com/modernwisdom. That's drinklmnt.com/modernwisdom. Would you look at that? Clip is already over, but if you want more, don't be sad. The full episode is available right here. Go on.